The smell of roasted chicken filled the dining room, but I couldn't eat. My father's words froze me. He set down his glass and said calmly, "We've decided to sell your research, Lyra. It will finally make this family proud." My fork slipped from my hand. My research? The one I had worked on for 7 years? The one only Kofi, my late mentor, and I understood? I looked at my parents' faces and my sister's smirk. They thought I was helpless. They thought I would sit quietly while they destroyed my life's work. What they didn't know was this. I had already prepared for the day my own family would betray me. The dining table was filled with food, laughter, and clinking glasses, but Lyra could not taste anything. She sat quietly listening until her father's voice cut through the noise. He set his glass down and said in a calm but heavy tone, "We have decided to sell your research, Lyra. It will finally bring honor to this family." For a moment, time stopped. Lyra's hand trembled, and the fork slipped from her fingers. Her heart pounded as the words sank in. Her research? The one she had built with sleepless nights, endless experiments, and years of sacrifice? Her sister Saad leaned forward, a smirk playing on her lips. "Yes, Lyra," she said sweetly. "We have always supported you. Now the world will see your brilliance, and the family will shine." But her tone carried poison. Lyra could see through her fake smile. The pride in her eyes not for her but for the glory she thought was now hers to enjoy. Sada's words pierced deeper than the announcement itself. She was pretending to be on Lyra's side while clearly celebrating her downfall. Lyra's mother clapped her hands lightly, as if announcing a victory. "At last, all your effort will pay off, and we can live the life we deserve." Her father nodded, confident and proud, already imagining the wealth and recognition. To them, it was not Lyra's work anymore. It was their ticket to fame, their prize. Lyra sat in silence, her face calm, but inside her chest, anger burned like fire. She wanted to scream, to remind them that it was her sweat, her sacrifice, her dream. But she swallowed every word, keeping them trapped behind her lips. If she spoke now, she would lose control, and that was exactly what they wanted, to see her break, to make her surrender. Instead, she lowered her gaze, pretending to accept their decision. She let her parents and sister believe she was powerless, a young woman too weak to fight back. But deep inside, her mind was already working, sharper than ever. Every smile from Saad, every word from her parents only strengthened her resolve. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken everything from her with one announcement. But Lyra knew better. She sat still, hiding her rage, hiding her plan. The dining room was filled with laughter and pride, but Lyra's silence was stronger than their voices. Because while they were celebrating, she was preparing. Lyra's mind drifted back to the beginning, to the small laboratory where it all started. She remembered the old wooden desk covered with notes, and the kind but sharp eyes of Professor Kofi watching her every move. He was more than just a teacher. He was a guide, a second father, someone who believed in her when no one else did. When the world laughed at her ideas, he was the one who told her, "Keep going, child. Great things always sound impossible at first." Day after day, they worked side by side. Kofi would sit with her late at night, explaining complex formulas, sketching ideas on scraps of paper, pushing her to think bigger than her fears. He never treated her like a student who needed rescuing. He treated her like an equal, like a partner in something far greater than themselves. It was his trust that gave her courage, and his patience that shaped her into the woman she had become. Together, they built the first pieces of the project. Every breakthrough came with celebration, every failure with a lesson. Lyra remembered his laughter when an experiment went wrong and his calm voice saying, "Even mistakes are teachers." Slowly, the dream became real. The research took form, and Lyra's heart grew stronger with every step. But she also remembered the darker days, the ones when Professor Kofi's health began to fail. His strong hands trembled, his steps slowed, yet he never stopped teaching. Even from his hospital bed, he reviewed her notes, correcting errors with shaky fingers. One evening, when the sun painted the sky in shades of red, he held her hand and whispered words she could never forget. "Protect your mind, child. Even blood can turn against you." At the time, Lyra did not fully understand. She thought it was the sickness talking, a warning born out of fear. But his eyes had carried a weight, as if he knew something she did not. He made her promise to guard her work, to never hand it over blindly, no matter who asked for it. Ideas are more valuable than gold, he had said. And greed can live even in the people closest to you. That night was the last time she saw him alive. Professor Kofi left her with knowledge, strength, and a trust fund in her name that legally tied the research to her alone. His absence still left a hole in her heart, but his words echoed louder now than ever. Sitting in her parents' house, betrayed by her own family, she realized he had been right all along. Even blood could turn. Lyra sat at the edge of the table, her eyes lowered, as her father cleared his throat. His face carried the look of a man who believed he had done something clever. "Lyra," he said, leaning back in his chair. "We already signed the first papers with investors. The deal is almost ready. Soon, this family will finally rise to the level we deserve." Her mother nodded proudly, her necklace glinting under the light as she added, "Yes, child. Imagine the houses, the cars, the respect. People will finally look at us as a powerful family." For a moment, Lyra felt her chest tighten. They had not even asked her. They had not even thought about her voice. Everything she had worked for, her long nights of research, her sleepless dedication, had been reduced to a business deal they had taken into their own hands. The sting was sharp, but what hurt even more was the way they looked at her. Not as their daughter who built something extraordinary, but as someone too weak to understand the value of what she had. Her father gave a short laugh, almost dismissive, and said, "You're too young to handle this kind of success. You wouldn't know what to do with such opportunity. Leave these things to us. We know what's best for the family." Her mother leaned closer, her tone filled with false sweetness. "Don't worry, darling. You will still have your name on it. But let the adults take care of the real work. Just be grateful." Across the table, Saad was glowing, her eyes full of victory. She clapped her hands softly and said, "This is the best choice. Lyra could never manage something so big. At least now, our family will finally be seen as important." Her words felt like a knife twisting deeper into Lyra's chest. They were all united in the belief that she was incapable, that she was only useful for what she had created, not for who she was. Lyra stayed silent, hiding her emotions, but inside her anger grew. They had stripped her of credit, stripped her of voice, and turned her greatest achievement into their ticket for wealth and status. They thought they were protecting her, but in truth, they were protecting themselves. Every smile on their faces showed greed, not love. And as they spoke of riches and power, Lyra made a silent promise to herself. This was not their victory. The work was hers, and she would make sure the world knew the truth. While her family celebrated their so-called victory, Lyra kept her face calm, but her mind was already several steps ahead. They thought they had taken her work completely, that they owned every file and every result. What they did not know was that Lyra had never trusted anyone enough to put all her research in one place. From the very beginning, she had prepared for betrayal, just as Professor Kofi once warned her. Every late night she spent in the lab, every breakthrough she recorded, she had quietly created a backup, one only she could access. That hidden backup was not stored on her family's computers or anywhere near their reach. It lived on a secret server, locked under her name and protected with codes only she knew. The files her parents and Saad held in their hands looked impressive, but in truth they were hollow. Lyra had given them enough to believe they had power, but not enough to complete the work. The formulas were missing key steps, the designs skipped vital parts, and the data was written in a way that only she could truly understand. To the untrained eye, it looked perfect. To investors it seemed valuable. But the moment anyone tried to build from it, the whole system would collapse. Lyra remembered the nights when she set up this hidden trail. She had told no one, not even her closest friends, because she knew the world could change in a second. Trust was fragile, and greed could come from anywhere, even from those who called themselves family. So she worked in silence, creating layers of protection around her real innovation. Every password was connected to memories only she could recall, every code tied to patterns only she could recognize. Now, as her parents bragged about their deal and Saad smiled like she had already won, Lyra's heart held steady. They thought they had stolen everything, but what they held was nothing more than a shadow. The truth, the real treasure, was still safe in her hands. She allowed them to carry on with their lies, knowing that when the time came, the difference between her true work and their incomplete copy would be exposed. Lyra's calm silence was not weakness, it was strategy. She had planted the seeds of their downfall long before they even thought of betrayal. And soon, the world would see who really held the power. Not her greedy family. Not the investors. Only her. The next morning, Saad walked into Lyra's room with a folder pressed tightly against her chest. Her smile was wide, but her eyes carried a sharpness that Lyra knew too well. She placed the folder on the table and said in a sugary voice, "Lyra, we just need your signature. It's only a formality. Nothing serious." She slid the papers across as if she were doing Lyra a favor. Lyra looked down at the stack of contracts. The words were heavy with legal terms, long paragraphs designed to confuse. But she quickly noticed the lines that mattered most. Her name being shifted, her rights being erased, her research being declared family property. It was a clever trick, one meant to trap her into giving everything away with a single stroke of a pen. Saad tapped her fingers impatiently, watching closely, waiting for her to fall into the trap. Pretending not to understand, Lyra forced a small smile and said, "Of course, I trust you." She picked up the papers and slowly flipped through them, letting her eyes wander over the details. But while Saad thought she was skimming carelessly, Lyra was actually reading carefully, memorizing every clause, every signature line. More importantly, she had her phone hidden beneath the table, quietly recording the entire exchange, the contracts, Saada's words, the proof that her family was plotting against her. Saad leaned in, trying to appear gentle. "It's just paperwork, Lyra. You don't need to bother reading it. We're doing what's best for you." Her tone dripped with false kindness, but her nervous shifting gave her away. She wanted Lyra to sign quickly before doubts could rise. But Lyra remained calm, nodding as if she were convinced. Instead of signing, she asked simple questions. "So all this is really necessary? My name will still be there." Saad quickly reassured her, repeating the lies with practiced ease. Every word, every promise, was being captured on the recording. Finally, Lyra placed the pen down and pretended to hesitate. "Maybe I'll sign it tonight," she said softly, as though she was unsure but willing. Saad frowned but forced another smile. "Fine. Just don't take too long. The investors are waiting." She gathered the papers and left, thinking she had Lyra cornered. As the door closed, Lyra held her phone tightly, replaying the short clip she had just captured. Proof. Evidence. Everything she needed to show the world what her family was trying to do. On the surface, she looked like the obedient daughter, but behind the calm mask, she had just secured the weapon that could destroy their entire scheme. The house was transformed that evening. Expensive decorations filled the dining room. Silver plates shone under the lights, and the smell of rich food floated through the air. Lyra's parents had spared nothing for this dinner. To them, it was the night their family would finally step into wealth and power. The investors, men and women in fine suits, arrived one by one, shaking hands and smiling as if the deal was already sealed. Her father greeted them proudly, saying, "Welcome, welcome. Tonight you will see the future in our hands." Her mother followed, boasting about how hard their family had worked on this project. Saad, dressed elegantly, played the perfect role of the brilliant daughter, standing tall and smiling as if the research had been her own creation. They spoke with confidence, bragging about years of work, about sacrifices, about a vision they claimed belonged to all of them. But in the corner of the room sat Lyra. She was quiet, her face calm, her eyes steady. Nobody paid much attention to her, and that was exactly what she wanted. While her parents and Saad took all the praise, she remained the silent shadow at the table, watching, listening, and waiting for the right moment. The investors raised their glasses, excited by the promises they were hearing. One of them leaned toward her father and asked, "So, this is truly groundbreaking? Something no other company has achieved?" Her father puffed out his chest. "Absolutely. Our daughter Lyra made the foundation, but we guided it. We shaped it. This is our family's pride." Saad quickly added, "And we are ready to bring it to the world with your support." Every lie spoken around that table made Lyra's heart burn, but she did not let it show. She remembered Kofi's words, remembered the warning that even family could turn, and she kept her silence. She knew if she reacted too early, all her plans would fail. She had to let them believe they were winning. She had to let them expose themselves fully. As the food was served and the glasses clinked, her parents laughed loudly, painting pictures of a future filled with money and fame. The investors nodded, impressed, eager to see proof of what they were promised. Sada's smile grew brighter, her eyes shining with greed. Lyra simply sat still, her hands folded neatly on her lap. To everyone else, she looked powerless, almost invisible. But inside, she was steady as stone. She knew her moment was coming. And when it arrived, their pride would shatter like glass. The investors leaned forward eagerly as dinner came to an end. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, looked at Lyra's father and said, "We've heard enough promises. Can we finally see the project in action?" The room grew quiet, and all eyes turned to the large screen set up in the corner. Her father nodded proudly, motioning to Saad. "Of course," he said. "Our family has prepared everything." Saad walked to the computer, her smile glowing with confidence. She clicked through the files, ready to show what she believed would impress the room. Lyra sat silently, her gaze fixed on the screen. Inside, her mind was calm, steady. This was the moment she had prepared for. The files her family held were not the real thing. They were fragments, broken pieces, enough to look valuable but impossible to complete. She had arranged them carefully, so that only a demonstration would reveal the truth. The screen lit up with charts and formulas. For a brief second, the investors nodded, impressed by the numbers they didn't fully understand. Sada's voice rang with pride as she explained, "This research is years ahead of anything in the field. With your investment, we can change the future." Her parents clapped along with her words, nodding and smiling. But then the program froze. The graphs disappeared, replaced by error messages. Sada's smile faltered, and her fingers scrambled across the keyboard. It's just a small glitch," she stammered. She clicked again, but the screen went black. The system refused to respond. Whispers spread across the table as the investors exchanged uneasy looks. Her father stepped in quickly, his voice strained. "Don't worry, this is only a technical issue. The research is strong." But the screen flashed again, this time showing incomplete data, missing steps, and formulas that made no sense. One investor leaned back, his face tight with suspicion. "This doesn't look finished. Are you hiding something from us?" Her mother tried to laugh, brushing it off. No, it's complete. Just some problem with the computer." But panic was already spreading. Sada's hands shook as she pressed more keys, only to watch the files collapse further. The investors' whispers grew louder. "Is this even real?" one muttered. Lyra kept her calm expression, her silence more powerful than any words. Her family was falling apart in front of everyone, exposed by their own greed. She had given them enough rope, and now they were tangled in it. While the investors' doubt grew and her family's faces turned pale, Lyra sat still, waiting for her moment to rise. The room was filled with tension as the investors grew restless. Saad kept pressing keys but nothing worked. Her father wiped sweat from his forehead, trying to assure the guests that the research was real. Her mother forced a nervous laugh, but the damage was clear. The investors exchanged doubtful glances, their excitement fading into suspicion. That was the moment Lyra finally rose from her chair. Her quiet movement drew every eye in the room. She walked slowly to the front, her face calm, her steps steady. Without saying a word, she reached for the computer. Saad tried to stop her. "Lyra, don't," she began, but Lyra's sharp gaze silenced her. With one smooth motion, she connected a small drive and typed in a series of codes only she knew. Within seconds, the black screen lit up again, but this time with perfectly organized files, complete formulas, and polished data. The room fell into stunned silence. "This," Lyra said clearly, "is the real research. The one I spent 7 years building. The one my late mentor, Professor Kofi, and I protected." She clicked through the slides, each graph flowing smoothly into the next, each result undeniable. The investors leaned forward again, but this time their eyes were wide with awe, not suspicion. What they were seeing was far beyond anything they had been promised. Her parents looked frozen, their smiles gone. Saad stood stiffly, her hands trembling. Lyra continued, her voice steady and firm. "The files you saw earlier were incomplete. I left them that way for a reason. Because I knew one day, greed would try to steal what I created. And I was right." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then she revealed the final truth. "This research is legally registered under my name and Professor Kofi's trust. Every formula, every result, is protected by law. Any attempt to sell it without my consent is not only fraud, but a crime punishable in court. No one, Not even my own family has the right to claim it. The investors looked at each other in shock. Some nodded with respect. Others frowned at the betrayal they had just witnessed. Lyra closed the files and stepped back, her eyes sweeping across the table. You were promised something false. Now you have seen the truth, and you know who it belongs to. Her family sat in silence, their pride shattered. The investors no longer looked at them. All eyes were on Lyra, the true owner, the true mind behind the work. For the first time, she stood tall, no longer in her family's shadow but in her own light. The silence after Lyra's revelation did not last long. The investors, once eager and smiling, now stood up with angry faces. Some shook their heads, some muttered under their breath, and others did not even bother to speak. They pushed their chairs back sharply and began to walk toward the door. One man slammed his briefcase shut. Another waved his hand in disgust. We came here for innovation, not lies, one of them said coldly as he left. The sound of footsteps filled the room as the investors stormed out, their anger clear. Her parents tried to call after them. Her father pleaded, "Please wait, we can explain." But no one listened. Her mother rushed forward, forcing a weak smile, but an investor stopped her with a sharp look. "You tried to cheat us," he said, "and you thought we wouldn't find out." Those words cut deep, and her mother froze, unable to defend herself. Saad stood quietly, her face pale, her pride broken. She glanced at Lyra, but Lyra did not return the look. The investors were gone now, leaving the grand hall empty and heavy with shame. Outside, neighbors who had gathered to see the great presentation began whispering. They had watched the rich and powerful leave in anger. They had heard pieces of what happened inside. Some shook their heads in disappointment. Others whispered loudly enough for the family to hear. So all along it was Lyra's work? Imagine trying to sell your own child's research behind her back. Greed has no end. The words spread quickly, like wildfire, from one mouth to another until everyone knew. Her parents stood in the center of the room, frozen. The truth hit them harder than they expected. They had not only lost the chance to gain wealth from the investors, but they had lost something far bigger. Their respect, their image in the community, the trust of those around them. For years, they had cared more about appearances and money than about fairness. Now, in front of everyone, that mask was gone. Her father sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Her mother tried to speak, but no words came out. She looked at the neighbors outside the windows, their eyes sharp and judging. She knew that from that day forward, every time she walked through the village, whispers would follow her. It was too late to undo what they had done. Their betrayal had cost them everything. Money could be regained, opportunities could come again, but dignity, once broken, could never be fully restored. They had lost their daughter's trust, the respect of investors, and the honor of their community. Greed had finally collapsed on them, leaving only emptiness behind. The dining room that once held pride and power now felt small and heavy with shame. The long table, filled only hours ago with rich food and investors' laughter, now sat empty. Her father sat slouched in his chair, staring at the floor, while her mother leaned against the wall, her eyes swollen with regret. Saad kept her gaze down, too embarrassed to meet anyone's eyes. The room that once echoed with their arrogance now held nothing but silence. Lyra stood tall at the center, her presence stronger than ever. The same place where her father once told her she was too young to understand success now belonged to her. She looked at each of them one by one, her parents who betrayed her, her sister who tried to trick her. And for a moment, none of them could even meet her eyes. They knew she had won, and they had lost. Her voice was calm, steady, but it carried the weight of truth. "You tried to sell me for status," she said, every word cutting like a blade. "You thought of me as a shortcut to wealth, but you forgot something. I am the mind behind the billions. Without me, there is nothing to sell." Her father tried to lift his head, his lips trembling as if to speak, but no words came. Her mother opened her mouth, but all that escaped was silence. They had excuses, they had defenses, but none of them mattered now. The truth was too clear. Lyra took a slow step back, her hand resting lightly on the folder that carried her real work, the one they could never touch again. "I don't need a family who sees me as a price tag," she continued. "I don't need your approval. I don't need your false promises. I have my mind, my work, and my dignity." And that is worth more than all the money you ever dreamed of. Saad finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears, but Lyra did not pause. She turned toward the door, her steps sure and unshaken. Every movement showed strength. Every word she had spoken lingered in the air like fire. She walked out with her work in her hands, leaving behind the walls that had once tried to cage her. The door closed behind her with quiet finality. Inside, her family remained seated, broken in silence, their greed turned into ashes. Outside, Lyra walked into her own future, free, powerful, and unstoppable.